conversations hosted by the Milpitas Community Education Endowment. For those people who don't know who I am, and most people already know who I am, my name is Robert Jung. I am the founder for Milpitas Community Education Endowment, and I'd like to welcome everyone here. It's a small but intimate meeting, so you get to ask a lot of questions, and we'll be ready for that. And so what we do here with this community conversations is this is intended to be a monthly program that we will hold typically at the last Thursday of every single month, and for as long as school is in session. So we will have March, April, and May sessions, and we'll have different topics, and we'll publish those as we go. But the intention of this is to really bring together parents in the community to talk about different issues that might affect students in general, and as well as our community. So that's the intention of this. The idea of this is not going to be some problem-solving session or anything like this. The intention of this program is to actually bring to the community food for thought, and where we take it from there, it goes outside of this particular program, but it's really to just bring food for thought and have the conversation. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay, are we good with that? Questions? Okay, all right. So today we're going to talk a little bit in celebration of a program from Sandy Hook Promise, which is back east. And for those people, hopefully everyone's heard of Sandy Hook. I'll call it the tragedy that happened back east. But the thing that was very intriguing to me was that they took a very interesting approach and actually developed programs that became proactive in the community. And we're going to talk about one of these programs today, and I'd like to introduce Jillian Sequeira, hopefully got her name right. She is the representative, she's the outreach coordinator for Sandy Hook Promise for Northern California. So I'm going to say welcome, and she can tell, you can tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you guys for having me tonight. I so appreciate it. So the California team in Sandy Hook Promise is actually a pretty new entity. We only launched this summer, as I was telling Robert. So most of the work we've been doing has been, it began kind of in Connecticut on the East Coast, but then we started focusing on the top 25 states where the most gun violence is happening. And then we settled within that top 25 on the top 10 and putting boots on the ground in those top 10. California's in the top 5. So that's kind of why I came out to California, why I started doing this work. I'm originally from the DC metro area, and so when I go into schools, I always explain to people that I can't quite explain to you where I'm from because there's no direct parallel in the Bay Area. So DC is an interesting mix of very obviously an urban environment, but you can go half an hour outside of the city and be in a very, very rural, more southern environment. We obviously have this Confederate history in Virginia where I grew up. And so I grew up being exposed to both gang violence in the city and a culture of proud gun ownership outside of the city. So that's kind of my background, is understanding the lines between those two, how gun violence affects different communities. And of course, I was in high school during the Virginia Tech shooting, and I had friends on campus. So I understand kind of what it's like to get those texts, what it's like to get those calls. So that's kind of where I came into this work, is kind of trying to make that accessibility between different communities, both rural and urban, understanding that violence looks different in different places for different communities, and we have to support students from all different communities to make them feel safer in their schools. So Sandy Hook Promise is entirely focused on the prevention side of violence, so getting to people before it happens. So we'll talk a little bit about our programming, but this week is special because it is Say Something Week, which is a call to action week across the country. We have over 3,000 schools participating, and we're getting students thinking about not only what warning signs and signals of violence and self-harm look like, but how they should speak up, when they should speak up, and who they should speak up to. So who the adults there are in their life, how they can approach them, how that conversation goes. And I'll mention to you guys as well our anonymous reporting system, which is something we have in certain states. We have it just rolled out in our first couple schools in the Bay Area, and we're going statewide in the state of Pennsylvania right now. And that's actually a two-way anonymous system where students who don't have an adult in their life who they trust can report to our crisis center anonymously if they see something they're concerned about. And we actually just had a shooting averted last month. using that anonymous reporting system. So we know it's working, we're getting good feedback all the time. But like I kind of just opened with, it's all about that prevention side, and it's more about a cultural shift than it is about a legislative agenda, where I'm working more on training students to look out for each other and to create the community that they feel safe in. I heard you mention to Rob when we came in, students saying something about, they worry about being killed in school. And we try to empower them to think about not only what they can do for themselves, but what they can do for the person sitting across from them they don't know that well. Because that person might be scared as well, and they never talk about that, they don't have an open discussion. So we want to make that discussion open, and we want to give them the tools and the skills they need to make any community they're part of safer, even in small ways.
Right, and that's perfect segue as to why I was so intrigued with this particular program when I read about it, is because it has two components that really interested me. One was it gave kids, especially our teens, the ability to be empowered to do something, right, and do something positively. And then number two is also very positive in the sense that it is a preventive mechanism. It is not what many of our programs exist today are reactive. It's even our drills that we do in our schools, it's a reaction to something that might happen, and by the time that happens, it's an act of desperation. So what this program does, or at least parts of this program does, at least from what I understand, it really gets to the point where we try to limit the number of instances where people need to get to that point of desperation. And that's what I think this Say Something program does and offers to our teams. So I'd like to, we'll kind of dive into it a little bit. I just want to take a step back in terms of today's conversation. We're going to start the conversation, and then when you guys have questions or you want to join us, just raise your hand and we'll acknowledge you and you can jump in on this. Okay, so that's how this program works. I know some of you may be quiet, a little shy, that's okay. And so we'll start the conversation and you guys can kind of join in. So, you already started a little bit about our the Say Something program. Can you tell us a little bit about what that program is, and then what we will do is also have an overview of all the different programs in Sandy Hook Promise. So why don't we cover that?
So Say Something can be implemented in two ways. So the first way, which is what most of our districts do, what most of our schools do, is a presentation. So I have a team of presenters in the Bay Area. They're primarily concentrated in East Bay, but I'll send them wherever I can send them. They come out to a school for a 30 to 45-minute presentation, which we're going to demo for y'all so you can see it. And it talks through 3 steps. The first is the warning signs, signals, and threats of someone planning to hurt themselves or others, what that looks like. The second is acting immediately and taking it seriously. We talk about when you should call 911 versus when you have time to talk to an adult, what that distinction looks like. And the third is talking to that adult. Figuring out who you should talk to. We do a little brainstorming with students, and then we do a role play to demonstrate that conversation and how to make it less awkward, how to show them that it only takes 30 seconds, it's not going to be a big dramatic thing. And then that's followed up by the Safe Promise Club, which is a club we embed in the school to talk about preventing violence throughout the school year. And depending, I'll kind of get into this later, but depending on your school, it might be rolled into an existing club, it might be a standalone club, but that means students talk about it kind of after we send the presenter in to kickstart it. Then during the call to action weeks, like this week, they do an activity every day to get people thinking about it. I have some students that are more political, some students that are more apolitical. So for example, I have a high school in Napa where the Safe Promise Club does a lot of work tying Say Something into what the March for Our Lives students are doing as well. So sometimes those bridges are built there. And then Say Something Anonymous Reporting System is a heavier lift. So that, a Say Something presentation I can bring into you with a week or 2 weeks notice. That's a quick turnaround. But Say Something Anonymous Reporting System, that typically is a 10 to 12 week lift because we do need to work with PD to get people trained. So the Anonymous Reporting System is routed to our 24/7 Crisis Center down in Florida, and that's staffed by trained crisis counselors. So when a tip comes in, it's fully anonymous, but you do have to select your school. So your school will be registered, and we'll just have, blank anonymous student from X high school. They begin the conversation, And then our crisis counselor has a conversation with the anonymous tipster to get a little more information. Then they divert it into one of two streams, life safety or non-life safety. If it's a non-life safety trip, it'll be routed to your school team, and the school team can handle it the next day, Monday morning, whenever this kid comes in. If it's a life safety tip, it'll be routed to law enforcement, who will have met with and trained to understand how the tips come in. So we actually provide resources and new training for dispatchers to make sure they understand how to work with the anonymous reporting system. But like I said, it's a heavier lift because obviously we want to make sure everyone is really trained in that chain of command. We don't want any tips slipping through. We don't want any dispatchers not understanding what to do with the tips. So there are two different tracks, but probably what you'll see most often is that presentation that I mentioned.
Right. And the nice thing about this particular program is, at least to the school district, it's completely free. So there is no cost. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And all of our programs.
Yeah, in all the programs, there is actually no cost to a school district or even a community organization who wishes to pursue this. So this is a nice start. It's funded by their foundation. Excuse me. And it's a nice way if community organizations or the school district chooses that this is a path that we wish to pursue here in Milpitas. So the cost is not kind of the barrier that we have to cross, right? So, excuse me, I'm gonna let you keep going with that. I'm already getting hoarse already. But tell us a little bit about some of the other programs that you have as well. Because say something is targeted typically towards our teens, but the Sandy Hook Promise program actually has a series of programs that covers a wide range of our students.
Yeah, so that's the first of our student-facing program. The second student-facing program is Start with Hello, and that again is marketed towards 6 through 12, but it also can be used in elementary schools, and I'm on hand, to adapt that for any principal who wants to adapt it, any teacher who wants to adapt it. Start with Hello focuses on social inclusion, and it also can be kicked off with a 45-minute presentation, or it can be self-implemented by staff on site. And that focuses on understanding when somebody is isolated and making sure that people reach out to them and connect with them so they don't hurt themselves or others. So that's more kind of the groundwork of making an inclusive community, making sure people are looking out for each other, and then Say Something just builds on top of it to another layer. Say Something, I would say, can be more serious because we do talk directly about violence and suicide. We show screenshots from Instagram. We talk about actual instances where this has happened. Whereas Start with Hello is a bit more, I wouldn't say vague, but I would say general. We don't go specific with those kind of more targeted examples because it is, again, a more general kind of base program. But that being said, it's a great way to get students thinking about maybe someone they pass every day in the hall that they don't say hi to, someone they should be looking out for. The other two programs we offer are staff-facing. The first is SOS, Signs of Suicide, and that's partnered with a clinic out in East Coast called Screening for Mental Health. And it's a train-the-trainer model. So first we train a school site team in the curriculum, in how to understand the signs of suicide in their student population, how to identify it, what it looks like for different demographics. Then they go back and train the students in the curriculum we've trained them in. At the end of that lesson, students submit a self-evaluation that can either be anonymous or can have their names on it. And it just kind of checks off whether they've seen any of those signs in themselves, whether they're concerned about themselves. And we actually recently had a school complete this, and 2 students were 5150 after that self-evaluation. So we know it works, we know it gets students the help they need. The final program, which is also staff-facing, is Safety Assessment Intervention. And that's a full-day training. It's run by Dr. Dewey Cornell out of the University of Virginia. He has a team that's been training and studying school shootings for 20 plus years. And it's a training where school-type teams look at case studies. They work in teams together. They practice activities to understand how they would assess different risks when they come in. And paired with SOS, it can be a great way to combat both violence and self-harm in your school. And again, we never are going to leave you high and dry and say one presentation and we're done. I come back and work all the time with teachers if they get retrained, and any school that enters into an MOU with us has a 3-year minimum commitment where I guarantee we'll come back, we'll retrain any teachers who need to be retrained. I'll support the students throughout that. So we are looking to build a longer program. You don't have to take all 4 programs. You're welcome to take one. You're welcome to self-implement. We want it to be a light lift for the school. But anytime we come into a school, we want to keep track of you. We're not going to come in for one presentation and never see you again. I stick like glue. I'm staying around. You won't get rid of me.
Great. Awesome. So Any questions so far about what we're trying to do today? Yeah,
Yeah.
go Vivek.
All right, so you're talking about all these amazing programs, right? But is there a way to measure the effectiveness of any of them, and how do you do so?
That's a fabulous question. So there are 3 studies going on actually in 3 districts around the country right now. It's LAUSD, Miami-Dade, and the third one is Boston Public Schools, I believe, where we are actually doing a 3-year study to track whether we're seeing results in terms of students coming in and then retaining that information. So it's focused on middle school students. So right now we're in the first year where we're talking to 6th graders. We're going to come back and talk to them in 7th and 8th grade to make sure they're retaining the information. But like I said, it's an ongoing study, so I don't have the results in my hands right now.
So you're starting the programs at 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it would help to answer Vivek's question is that I believe you guys have some statistics on how some of these programs have actually prevented situations that could have escalated quite a bit.
Yeah, so I have several different anecdotes where I've had communities come in. So for example, in the East Bay, we just had a school launch 3 weeks ago. The first night that they launched the anonymous reporting system, we had a tip come in about a student. 2 days later, we had a tip come in about a threat for a school shooting that wasn't credible. It wasn't actually something that we need to worry about, but staff were aware of it. And this week, I actually had a school where there was a shooting hoax, and it was reported because students understood how to say something to get people help. So I'm seeing things every week, but that quantitative data, I'd have to take a look at my notes. But thank you for asking. It's a great question.
Right? Other questions? All right, I tell you what, why don't we give you a flavor of what the program is, specifically the Say Something program, and she'll go through her presentation. And this presentation is what typically is done for students. We just want to give you a flavor for what it is so that you can see what the messages are provided to our teams. All right?
Yeah.
How about we do that? All right, we're going to get off the stage here, and she's going to drive. Okay, so let me get her going here.
I think it's in PowerPoint. And I'll just jump down to see something slides.
Okay.
So it's this little blue one here,
Oh,
and that's us, yeah.
all right, so let me put this on a slideshow, or actually, let's see. Yeah, or maybe.
Got it.
Okay,
All right, awesome.
I'm just gonna click as you go.
Okay,
'Cause
so
I don't know that this works.
like I said, I have a team of Bay Area presenters, and they all have a slightly different story. So if you heard from Jill, you would hear about growing up in Colorado, down the block from Columbine High School. If you heard from Terrence, you would hear about growing up in LA and being exposed to different forms of violence in the neighborhood. If you heard from Craig, you would hear about being a high school basketball coach and seeing violence happen to a student who was on his team. When I do the presentation, I talk about being from Virginia, and I ask students if they've heard of the city of Charlottesville. And I talk about what happened there, friends of mine who were present for that, and the idea that the young man who drove his car into a crowd full of people and killed a young woman showed signs for months that he had violent tendencies, and people in his community knew that about him and didn't say anything. So then we launched with a short video, and we'll see if it's embedded. It may not be. It's not a big deal if it's not. It's fine if it's not. So basically the video is a smash cut of different instances that have happened in schools across the country. So fighting, shootings, 911 calls, and it just demonstrates what it might look like in your school. It's about 2 minutes, 30 seconds, and we can cut it out of the presentation if you think it'll be triggering for your students, but typically it's a great way to get students thinking about how violence looks in their community and in different communities. So after that happens, when we show the brief video, we talk about all these moments having been built up to over time, and why didn't people say something? All the times you have these moments where people said, he told me he was going to do it, she was talking about it on Twitter, she said she wanted to do this, X, Y, Z, but, next slide, why didn't anyone say something? So then we get started kind of talking through what's happening at their school. So for example, If I go to a school where I know there's recently been a threat, I have a high school that had a threat averted this week, I would address that here. Tomorrow when I go to my school that just had a hoax, we're going to talk about the danger of hoaxes for a brief moment and how even if it is a hoax, it still doesn't mean you shouldn't take signals seriously. So we try and customize it, make sure we know what school we're at, take a moment to address what will be happening in their community. So we're going to talk through today simple steps that will help you prevent violence and make your community a little safer. Next slide, please. One, we do call and response for the middle schoolers just because it helps them thinking a little bit. So I won't make you do that here because it's a small room. But look for warning signs, signals, and threats. Act immediately, take it seriously. Say something to a trusted adult. Next slide. So we begin by talking about how schools are safe. I know it can be very scary for your students and for us as parents as well to think about someone going to school every day and being exposed to violence. But in reality, schools are some of the safest places in the world. Anytime I go to a school, I have to sign in, I have to get my driver's license, I've been fingerprinted and background checked. I don't get to walk into any single school. I'm vetted before I go. That being said, schools aren't immune to violence, and we know that you and your students are seeing this every day. We know that this is not a perfect space, but we can make it safer. So here's a couple of statistics that we just walked through, and typically I'll have a student read one out. We'll have a little call and response just to wake people up. It's early in the morning sometimes. And every presenter focuses on a different statistic. So I, for example, focus on students being threatened or injured with a weapon on school property, but if you go to the next slide, one of my favorite presenters always talks about the 1 in 3 statistic, and he always has someone look to their right and to their left. That's the 1 in 3. You're the 1 in 3. Students who report being sad or hopeless for 2 weeks in the past year. So we always kind of hone in on one statistic. It just depends presenter to presenter, which you really want to dig into. And then we walk through 3 steps. So we talk about the idea of empowerment here, about getting involved. If they have a Save Promise Club, then we just touch, kind of quick base there. Make sure they know when that club meets, what room it meets in. And 3 separate studies. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. Researchers found that 37% of threats of violence were sent electronically. You're good, you're fine. And we'll come back and touch base on social media a little later in the presentation. So most mass shootings are planned for 6+ months, and in most of these cases, it's a minimum of a week, and people are showing signs the entire time. So what we always tell students is that you never know whether someone's in that week or someone's in the 3rd month of that 6 months. You should never assume that someone won't act immediately, and you need to take it upon yourself to act as soon as you see a warning sign. Go ahead. 70% of people who die by suicide also exhibit these warning signs that we're going to walk you through, and it's up to you to take a moment, to take it seriously, and to think about how you might save a life. All right, and then we walk through, again, it's call and response, wake people up, we'll have them repeat after me, look for warning signs, signals, and threats, act immediately, take it seriously, say something to a trusted adult. All right, we're gonna walk through the first couple steps. If I can have the next slide. So what is a warning sign? Again, read aloud, wake people up, get juices flowing. The bracelets come in handy. We throw out bracelets to everybody who raises their hand and talks in the audience. So thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that indicate significant change and that an individual may be in need of help. And then I'll just read off a couple of these, and then each presenter will tell a different story. So I talk about excessive anger when I present because I was somebody who had a difficult home life growing up, and I wasn't allowed to be angry at home, and I would come to school and I would pick fights because I knew that my dad would never find out I was fighting at school, but I couldn't pick any fights at home. And that acting out wasn't because I was a bad kid, it wasn't because I was actually angry, it was because something else was happening in my life and I didn't have a place to express it. Different presenters talk about different things. So I have a presenter who talks about dramatic changes in physical appearance and talks about a friend dyeing her hair, having a huge change because something was happening in her home life. So this slide will look a little different depending on your presenter. Next slide, thank you. What is the warning signal? Gestures or actions to transmit information which can be either overt or vague in nature. And so here we each talk about a different one, but the one I typically talk about is giving away possessions. And one of my favorite presenters, he always talks about the idea of what does that mean? You know, giving away a piece of gum in your backpack versus giving away your PlayStation. Like, what is a possession that you treasure and what might be a signal when someone gives you a possession, you should be worried about them? I typically talk about mementos. If someone starts giving away things they really love from their room, whether it's a necklace or a pack of baseball cards or just something you know they treasure, it should be a little unusual. It's great to get gifts, but shouldn't you be thinking it's a little offbeat if a friend has never given you a gift like that before? and suddenly they give you something they really treasure, that should kind of send up a red flag for you. Go ahead. What is a threat? Go ahead. And these are typically the ones that are easiest to identify, but we also don't want to just brush past them. Life isn't worth living. I'm going to take her and her friends out. It's easy to write these off as a moment of someone being melodramatic, someone being angry, but you should think for a moment, have I seen the warning signs? Have I seen the warning signals? Does this feel like an escalation? Go ahead. So where are these found? Social media, we always have people call out. And then just a quick moment kind of talking through this, but the next slide is, this is typically where we really kind of get kids to think about what they've seen in their own social media accounts. So depending on how big the selection is, you know, sometimes I'm doing this in a room full of 900 students, sometimes it's 25 students. If it's a smaller room, we'll typically have a breakout moment where we talk about, is there ever a moment you've seen this on social media? It maybe isn't something this dramatic. It might be something more along the lines of this one, which talks about being bullied, feeling bad about yourself, and we just have a brief moment where we talk about, you know, is this something you've seen before? Go ahead. And then we also talk about other things that might be happening in your community. Again, before I come to a school, I always check with the administrator to see what the big problem is in the community. So for example, I have a school I'm going to tomorrow, just had lots of problems with child neglect and students being removed from their home by CPS. So talk about a moment like that. If you're, you know, it's not just about violence, it's not just about suicide, it could be about someone being unsafe in their own home. Just taking a moment to talk again about what's happening in your community. Act immediately, take it seriously. Thank you. Call and response, act immediately, wake everybody up. So all the time after moments like this, Charlottesville that I talked about, Sandy Hook shooting, all these different moments, after the fact there are people on the news saying, I thought they'd feel better the next day, I thought someone else would tell someone. And it's understandable because it's awkward sometimes to be the person who says something. Go ahead. But it's important to keep in mind that there's no entry age. Just because someone's young, especially when we're talking to 11-year-olds, doesn't mean they're not capable of hurting themselves or others. And it doesn't mean that you should write it off as, well, I quickly looked over the signs, signals, and threats, and I decided there wasn't a problem. Let an expert, an adult, make that decision for you. Be an upstander, not a bystander. Don't assume that someone else will do this work or someone else will have this conversation. Think of it as if you were the only person who'd seen these signs. Go ahead. What stops people acting? Like I mentioned, it can be awkward, but also people are worried about getting a friend in trouble. Next slide, please. But there's a difference between telling on someone and saying something to get them help. So telling on someone is to get them in trouble, it's to embarrass them, it's because you want them to be caught out. Saying something is to make sure that they get the support they need, it's to save a life, it's to save other people's lives, and it's something you'll never regret. Go ahead. So we need you to act immediately and take it seriously. Don't take that beat if you're worried. Just go ahead and have that conversation with an adult. We're going to talk through how to have that conversation in a moment. All right, go ahead. So it's important to keep in mind if you ever think that anyone's life is in imminent danger, that it's going to happen before the end of the school day, you should go ahead and call 911. But if it's something you're not sure is going to happen right away, something you're a little confused about, something that you're not quite sure what to do with, that's when you take that moment to think about a trusted adult in your life and to approach them to have this conversation. So who is my trusted adult? And then we go through, I give an example on each slide. It could be a parent or teacher. So when I was in 7th grade, my favorite teacher was Rebecca Vienick, and I told her everything that happened in my life. It could be your guidance counselor, your school psychologist. It could be your school resource officer. This depends on whether the school has a school resource officer. It could be a religious leader and a mom, a priest. It could be a principal or school support staff. It could be your bus driver. It could be a custodian. It could be someone who you just see every day in the office when you sign in. It could be a coach or instructor or somebody who just looks out for you in the community, maybe a neighbor. It could be a community organization leader, whether that's Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, youth group, Young Life. So I want everyone to take a moment and just think to themselves, who is my trusted adult? And this slide differs slightly if we're doing the anonymous reporting system, because then we take a little more time to talk about if you don't have a trusted adult in your life, here's how you use the anonymous reporting system. Go ahead. So we're going to practice having this conversation. I know it's awkward, but this is just a way to make it easy, to make it quick, to not take any time every day. All right, so there are 3 simple steps. You don't have to stick to this verbatim, but this is just a little template to get you going. I must talk to you about, name the individual so we know who you're talking about. Tell us explicitly what they've done. She's threatened, I'm noticing. Share anything you've seen, whether it's a note, a screenshot from Instagram, and then ask for help. I need your help to get them help. And then if the student body is small enough, it's hard to do this in the groups of maybe 900 students, but if it's typically 300 students or below, we'll call students up and act out this role play. So why say something? You're the eyes and ears of the school. You're seeing things that we are not, that your teachers don't. They get to see you 5 days a week, but you're with each other 7 days a week. When you go home from school, you're with each other online. You're with each other via text. You're seeing each other in ways that we never see you, and you know more than we could ever know. Go ahead. Because you have that knowledge and that insider information, you have more power than we'll ever have to reduce this violence, to prevent these threats, and to keep each other safe. If you go ahead and work with these 3 steps to prevent violence, you could have moments where you saved someone's life, where you made a difference, or where you even averted a mass act of violence. And then we have everyone stand up to shake it off, to get ready, to get out of the auditorium, and we take the pledge. I'll look for warning signs, signals, and threats, act immediately, take it seriously, and say something to a trusted adult. And that's the presentation. Obviously, it takes longer when it's 900 kids and you have to stop to shush people and like hang out.
So what do you guys think? Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
This is, as we stated before, this is sort of the approach in terms of presentation target for our team. So this is middle school and up, right? Because they have the sense that they are all on Instagram and all sorts of social media. So do you guys have questions on this particular approach? I'm not suggesting we do it. I'm suggesting that this is one approach, right? And something that might be worthwhile having further conversations on, right? Thoughts?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in the trusted adults, do you have any training for the parents? My concern is first of all, you left a great impression with me.
Thanks.
Well, an effort to reduce violence, protect our communities, protect our kids, I think is fantastic. And the things you mentioned made a lot of sense. But one of the things I thought about when you spoke about trusted adults, just before that, there was comments about potentially rationalizing someone's actions. And my concern would be is you have training for the students, you have training for school staff. What about the adults that might be the trusted adult and could potentially rationalize a statement or action as well?
So there is, not in Say Something, but in Science of Suicide, we do parent training to accompany that. And whenever I go to a school, I always give the principal my contact information to give to all parents. So if they do have questions about the program, they can contact me. In my experience, parents don't contact me, but I always make sure they can if they have questions, if they're nervous about their student coming to them with an event. What I will say is more common is that the student comes to a member of staff. It's typically a counselor or a teacher, not a parent, because it's awkward to talk to your parents.
I'm a dad, I get that.
Yeah.
So great. That's a great point. That's a good question. Other thoughts?
So my question for you, Robert, would be, is Milpitas Unified School District considering this? Or another option?
So we're actually, the approach I'm taking right now is that we're taking sort of having a conversation within the community, because we want to find out from parents what do they think, and is this something worthwhile to pursue. If it's something worthwhile, that we hear a lot of input that says, hey, this is something we want to see in our schools, we're going to invite our superintendent and the president of the school board who went out that way to say, hey, is this something that we should pursue? And so we'll have that conversation as well. I did invite him so that he got a piece of it. He's not here. We'll have to catch him up. But that's at least the current approach. Because my hope is that it's not only the schools. It should be really a community effort, right?
Yeah.
Certainly, it can start in the schools, but if something happens outside the school, which lots of things like Instagram and various internet bullying happens is actually, it's not during the school day. And we want to be able to have a network, in my opinion, of trusted advisors in the community and not only the schools. That's just my viewpoint. Other thoughts? Yeah.
How do you convince your child to, because like sometimes they say, he's my best friend. I don't want to, say something to get him in trouble.
Yeah.
So how do you convince him to
So
say something?
two pieces. The first would be the personal stories that we tell. So I obviously was doing kind of a shortened version for you guys. But I always tell the story to wrap up about my best friend in elementary school, who I went to school with, and we really liked lizards, and that was like our bonding thing in life. And we transferred to different middle schools, came back together in high school, and I didn't talk to him because he was uncool, and I didn't want to compromise my social status, and he had really bad addiction issues, and I just wasn't tuned into that, and I just kind of tell that story to talk to kids, and like I said, every presenter has a different story. So in my experience, whatever story you tell, that's the kid that comes up to you. So if I talk about addiction, a kid typically comes up to me at the end and says, my mom has addiction issues. If I talk about suicide, a kid comes up and says, I lost somebody. We're talking to a group of students on Tuesday, and a student who had just lost a friend to gun violence came up and talked to us afterwards. So the personal story, I think, is the first connection with the student because they can see themselves in you. The second piece is that Save Promise Club, because then it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm the person who's snitched and the person who's the geek. It's like, oh, we're kind of promoting this culture, we're doing these fun activities, we're having stuff happening after school, and it becomes, again, like I talked about, a cultural shift, where it's more like, well, I feel really safe in this club, and I feel safe with these people, and they think it's okay to look out for people, so I guess it must be. But again, that comes back to the work I do with the clubs to make sure that we actually are embedding them in the school, that students understand how to get people help, and like I talked about in the presentation, highlighting that difference between snitching on somebody versus getting them help. And that's something I also, before I go into any school, I always talk to the principal about, do you have that problem with your students? Do you have open dialogue? Some small schools where everybody knows each other, it's much easier, and they just say, oh yeah, everybody trusts Mr. Ramirez, everybody knows him, everyone tells him everything. In the big schools where it's harder to have that tight relationship with a principal, then we'll take more time with that slide where we talk through that difference.
Yeah, but for example, like my boy, he said like his best friend stole something from the other friend.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, hey, you should not do that. But his best friend said, if you tell someone, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. We're not going to be BFF.
Yeah.
So my boy, he told me, and I said, oh, that's not good. Why don't you tell the teacher? He said, no, he's not going to be my friend anymore, and he's my only BFF.
So I would say for your son's case, first of all, I don't think that he would not be his friend anymore. I think he would be angry for a little while, but people actually forgive, especially young people forgive much quicker than they say they will. And the second thing is that he doesn't need to take out a billboard saying he told on his friend, right? He could tell the teacher in a very discreet way, or he could talk to someone else in a very discreet way, and it wouldn't necessarily have to get back to him. But I understand that that's why we have an anonymous reporting system, is because sometimes students are worried that it will get back to them and they'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
But if possible, I know it's hard when it's only 3 people and it's really hard in that tight-knit group, but if possible, I think the ideal thing would be for him to tell the teacher, if you could just say that you saw this, not say that it came from me, and if the teacher kind of understands what's happening, they won't name any names or call him out for that.
And they worry that because only him saw that. So he said, if I tell,
Yeah.
of course my best friend gonna know that only me, the one who tells the teacher.
No, it's a tough scenario, but I think realistically, you can't steal from other people, and it's a credit to your son that he didn't just kind of write that off as something that was fine. Good for him. Good for him. But I think that's also something he has to realize. It's better for someone to be angry at me for 2 weeks than for me to kind of see something happen and just ignore it and pretend it was fine.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of shocked the first time. So I don't know how to advise him. So I said, I think you should report to the teacher, the principal. Yeah. If your friend get angry at you, maybe a couple of days, a couple of weeks. But if he's still angry at you and he doesn't want to be your best friend or your friend anymore, that's fine, because that is not good. That person is not good. You don't need to be best friend with someone just mad at you because he do something wrong. You cannot cover for your friend when they do something wrong. You have to explain to him it's wrong. You should not do it. And if he just says no, I don't want to be your friend, so be it. You don't have to be his best friend anymore.
Yeah.
So
And in a way, you know, your son is looking out for his friend because he might be stealing because something else is going on in his life and he wants attention and he's acting out because of that, and maybe telling a teacher will bring that attention to him to make sure someone does check in on him, someone does know he's okay. He might need support, and this is how he's kind of acting out to get it.
So that's
Because we really don't want him to continue that, because
Yeah.
then we have other issues at a later point in time, right? Okay, other thoughts? Yes, sir.
I'd just say one quick thing here, having grown up in a different generation.
Yeah.
There's also the option of going to the friend and saying, hey, you know what? This was the wrong thing to do. I'll take care of giving it back to the other person.
Yeah,
So you don't have to do it. The other comment that I wanted to make, which I'm really grateful to see this program, is that the difference is, you know, years ago, we're talking 40 years ago, I spent years doing suicide prevention. What I really like about this program is often we sat on the phone waiting for somebody to call us. I like the fact that you're trying to create a community out there that is aware of these things beforehand, because I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I also share the same feeling that this was a very proactive type of program, and I think it's a way that if we choose to go pursue it, it has a potential of, you know, having, especially if we can do it across the community, where everyone's kind of on the same page. Everyone has a set of understanding or values that says, hey, it's okay to say something if I see something, right? Today, we have teams, and we have one back there, who, you know, there are many things that goes on, and a lot of our teams probably just wave it off, right? I mean, Vivek, you can share stories if you like, but I've seen that happen quite a bit when I'm at the high school. So that's one of the reasons why I thought this was a good program, at least to have a conversation on it. It's not perfect. There's no program that's ever perfect, but it's something that we can, if we choose, we can take a look at it and see what we can do within the community. Right. Yeah, go for it.
You actually just reminded me of something that happened today. So there's this girl I sat next to, right? And she was complaining about this teacher that something happened today that she didn't like. And she showed me her social media post. It was a post on Instagram, and it was like pretty much just negatively, just like bashing on that teacher, right? I said, hey, you know, this isn't right, because first of all, the teacher probably, that wasn't his intention, and second of all, this is like a form of cyberbullying, because even though he's an adult, you're still saying negative comments about him online. And then you can see that her friends are replying and agreeing with her too. So it was spreading around like that. So when I asked her, I'm like, well, I mean, if it's social media, then they're gonna see your name, first of all, right? And then why would you post this online? And then so she told me that usually teens nowadays, they have a real account and they have a spam account. So they can post whatever they want, and it's gonna reach out to whatever audience they like. And then, so I still told her that was wrong, but she didn't listen, because it's just her opinion. So just imagine all those other people out there, either using their real or fake account to like post whatever they want, right? And to them, it's not even like, it didn't even occur to her that that was a form of cyberbullying. When I told her about it, she just laughed, because she's like, hold on, I never even like thought about that. So I think it's just so common now. There's so much negativity, like especially on the internet. So it just washes over you, like it's just normal now.
Good point. Thanks for sharing. So one of the things I do want to bring us back to a little bit is you mentioned about the save clubs. Can you give us a little feel for how that might work?
Yeah, so typically it depends on, you know, how much time the school can give me. So if they are just run ragged, I just roll it into an existing club. So I've rolled it into Psychology Club, Gay Straight Alliance, Student Council, Web, Kindness Club, any sort of club that has students you think would be interested in this. If the school has the time, and this typically happens when I come into school in September and we have the whole school year to kind of build the club, we'll start a new club from scratch. I'll come to the first meeting, we'll get talking, I'll meet the students so I know them, and then once a year I hold actually a Bay Area training where all the clubs come together and they can meet each other. Once a year we hold a summit. It's right now being held in North Carolina because that's where the SAVE clubs were started, but we have a campaign to hold it in California so our kids can come to it because West Coast kids normally can't afford to fly to North Carolina. But the SAVE clubs were started in 1989 in North Carolina, outside of Concord. It's a pretty urban environment, urban high school. And on a weekend, a young boy named Alex Orange, who was 17 at the time, tried to break up a fight at a party and was shot and killed. On Monday morning, his friends came to school and talked to their teacher and said, we really want to do something about what happened to Alex over the weekend. And the teacher said, great, we'll have a meeting in the cafeteria after school. He expected maybe 20 kids to show up, and 300 students showed up that day. So that's kind of the foundation of where the work comes from, is that, you know, students see this all the time and they know that's happening and they want to have a voice in it. And I think there's no clearer evidence of that than what's happening with March for Our Lives right now. And a lot of the students who kind of got involved in the walkouts last year had all this energy, had all this passion, and now it's fizzled out because they didn't have a direction to channel it in. So my high schoolers are typically more politically active, whereas my middle schoolers typically focus more on the social inclusion aspect. So the SAVE Club only has to do a minimum of 4 activities per year, including participating in our 2 call to action weeks. This week, Say Something Week, start with Hello Week in September. But I always ask them to think about it more as a monthly meeting, something they can do every month in their school. It can be something as simple as an announcement. Today is Say Something Week, today is Gun Violence Awareness Day. It can be t-shirts, it can be art projects. We have writing and video and essay contests every year students can enter. Then also I try and come out to the schools and get them to do work with the speakers who come for the presentations, to kind of think about community events they can go to, whether it's setting up a table at a community event or having people in for their school. And then it typically, you know, I work with the club to tailor it to their environment. So if I know that a school has had issues with bullying, we really focus on the bullying aspect. If I know that a school had a shooting threat, we focus more on the gun violence side. But I want the students to really be the drivers of it, and they tailor what they see most as a problem in their school. So I have in East Bay, I have, you know, 1 district that's only 3 schools and a continuation high school. So my continuation high school, their club actually focuses a lot on anger management because a lot of the students are there because they were expelled from other schools. And so they do work around activities kind of to de-stress, to get people talking about their feelings, to have it a little bit more open, to kind of deal with that anger work. None of my other clubs in that district are doing that, but the other clubs haven't told me they need that work. So I try to always work with the students to make sure they tell me what they need in their school, and then I can support them from there.
Now, with the SAVE clubs, do you need a trusted adult to help oversee and coordinate the activities?
Yeah, exactly. So typically, like I said, if it's rolled into an existing club, it's just whoever that club advisor is. But if it's a standalone club, I will kind of, you know, touch base who that might be, and it might be a full-time teacher, it might be the principal themselves. It just depends on kind of what the staff looks like at the school.
Great, sounds good. Okay. Go
Just a
ahead.
comment, Robert.
Yeah,
So
sure.
if you do develop a SAVE, is it SAVE or SAVE Club?
Safe.
If you develop a SAVE Club at Milpitas High School, I'm willing to commit resources to support the club.
Awesome.
Now, whether that means attending meetings, connecting with the students, I have staff that will be very interested in doing that. And as part of the community, I think it's beneficial to have us supporting you. Now, the support will come based on what your needs would be,
Sure.
having a club.
Yeah, right.
In respect to, if you ever considered this service, there was a component for dispatching services. So the police department in this city manages the dispatch center. And so, again, if this is something you're looking at, we would be willing, instead of supporting you, partnering with you on a venture like that. So whether, again, it's this service or some other service, we'd be interested in doing.
Right, yeah.
Great.
No, I think this fits well within your overall strategy for community policing, which I think makes a whole lot of sense. So if we pursue this, I think there's huge opportunity especially, for example, in the Save Clubs, where, you know, as we talk about different activities, because our clubs, you know, generally will run the school year, which is typically 9 meetings, right? 8 to 9 meetings a year. Typically, they're once a month.
Yeah.
So we could set up something that where we would have activities that tie into, you know, the national type of activity weeks, but we could also have local things, which could be provided with the police department or other community agencies that where they get to hear maybe from the students, or the students get to hear from the community of how we can work together so that we're safer. And also, it could be a situation where students may get to a point where they can teach the community what does it mean to say something, right? And it's not it's not one direction is my point, because I suspect a lot of even our adults don't necessarily look for these particular signs, right? Or even our adults may brush off, you know, different signs that, you know, they're not even looking for, or they might hear and say, well, he's just blowing off steam or whatever, right? So I can see this as something that that we can roll this out across the community, so we're adults as well as teens are on the same page. So I think there's huge potential to do that. The question that I would need to do is really ask is, you know, as a community, you know, is this something that we really want? I mean, I'm one vote, and I'm certainly going to say, well, I think this is awesome, but no, I would have to see others who are saying, hey, this is something worthwhile to pursue, right?
Robert, a question to you. This is a very good plan, and I think that the whole community will rise up and all participate. So what is your plan to continue to pursue?
Well, first of all, we're having this meeting, but, you know, I'd like to see if we can have a bigger turnout, clearly, right? Because the more we talk about this, you know, whether it's through this type of forum or maybe through some other forums, the more people can hear what this is about and can make a reasonable choice if this is something that we would want. Because I find that I can't be the only person trying to drive this, right? In order for this program to be successful, at least in my opinion, is that the community has to pitch in, whether it is being a advisor for our Save Clubs, or whether it's someone doing a presentation like what maybe in a forum like this, where they're telling their neighborhood association in a neighborhood association meeting, or in a city, in a wider city-wide forum, right? Where they're talking about, hey, did you know about this, in this particular case, the Say Something program? And is this something that, as Milpitians, we choose something that we would want? And then we could tie in our police department, our other safety departments, the school district, and saying we are all on the same page, saying that this is worthwhile, and this is what, as Milpitians, we choose to have for our city. Because I really believe that in order for this particular program to be successful, it's got to be organic within our community. And it can't be just me, right?
And I would say, you know, if you want to share my contact information with any of your principals, they can always reach out and ask me questions.
Right.
But like Robert's saying, it's often best to do it at the district level, because
Yeah.
then we get all the schools involved at once.
Right.
But if you want to share any of this information with your principals, run with it. You know, I'm always available on my phone. I always pick up a call. The principal calls me.
Right. Now, just to be a little bit more specific, so my next step is actually, I will also provide this information to our superintendent. I will also have a conversation with the Council of PTAs, which is all of our PTAs here with each of our school district, within our school district. And, you know, I will present a shortened version of this so that they get the feel, they can get a feel for what this program is. And then we'll see, right? We'll get some input from our superintendent. I'll talk to Chris Norwood, who's the president of the Board of Education here in Milpitas. Certainly, I'm glad Chief Corpus is here, so he already gets this program. And we'll talk about, you know, to some of our city leaders and say, hey, did you know about this Say Something program? Is this something worthwhile to look at, right? And based on that input is sort of where we, you know, at least I will determine what I would want to do as the next step. And I would be looking for folks who are interested at the end of tonight. People who are interested can actually, I'm going to have you fill out a card, interest card, and let me know. So that's kind of my plan, but I'm open to other suggestions. Right?
Yeah, this kind of program, you know, the whole community, and not only the school, not only targeting in the, are you only targeting into the children only? Because I have, my past experience is even adult had this kind of.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
I have an experience in my past company that person looked very weird. Nobody afraid to say, dare to say something because of his position, you know. And then it really turned out he was very violent, you know. We kind of scared to death. So I think it's all this community that, even including the company, should be involved in this program just to say something.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the curriculum is designed for 6 to 12, but we're trying to build out right now how to bring it to college campuses and how to bring it to elementary schools. And trying to cover that broader range. That's just a conversation we're kind of beginning right now. But I think in a couple of years, we'd probably be focusing on adult education.
Yeah. Right, and certainly one of the things that, you know, that I think is key to this particular program is she talked about the trusted advisors, and Chief Corpus mentioned a little bit about this. Is that in my mind, if this program is going to be really successful, it's my opinion that we have to build this network of trusted advisors, or trusted adults, I'm sorry. Trusted adults who have been trained to deal with when someone walks up and say, hey, so-and-so I think needs help. They have to have a mechanism that they can deal with that, right? Because not everyone can deal with that, even adults. There are adults who say, I don't know what to do with that, right? So that's important. So that's why I feel like if this is something that's worthwhile to the community at large, we need to take the curriculum. We can certainly start at schools, but when we look at our trusted adults, we really need to have a network of trusted adults within the community. It could be the pastors, it could be certainly our school resource officers, our chief of police, you know, whoever it is. People should know who, you know, that there's a network within Milpitas that's going to be able to support this, right? It shouldn't, you know, as you point out, my suspicion is that there are adults who might need this more than some of our teens. But we want to teach our teens correctly so that, you know, we basically reduce the chances of getting to that level of desperation, right? So that's where I think the value of this particular program has. Other thoughts?
I'll offer a comment.
Yeah.
So I was an adjunct professor on this campus for the prior 2 semesters. And I'll tell you that, I mean, probably without saying it, that the students want to be safe. After the Parkland, Florida shooting, I spoke with my class and I had students in tears, wondering if they were going to be victims someday. And as time passes, they forget. And so I'm encouraged by programs like this because it doesn't allow people to forget.
Right.
You can continue carry momentum in the right direction for not only safe campuses, but safe communities.
Right.
So I could see, after being a professor the last 2 semesters, that you would get support from students, many students, for programs like this. So I congratulate you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and that's why I want to sort of bring the conversation here, because this program has really has a large following on the East Coast. It's slowly getting out, to the West Coast, but the shootings happen anywhere, right? Even in one of our safest neighborhoods in Thousand Oaks, right? That was considered one of our safest cities. You were saying, or you going to say?
This community as a legacy, there's actually a movie made about one of our students killing another student. And that really, from my standpoint, ought to be one of the foundations of your presentation. We had it right here at Milpitas High, and a movie was made out of it.
Good point.
So I know a lot of parents, they have small kids, just like my friends. I talked to her about this, and she really interested, but she had 3 small kids, 5th grade, 3rd grade, and kinder. So she would love to join, but she can't because she has to keep the children.
Yep.
So I know
So
a lot of parents, they are interested, but they cannot come.
Right, so we have to, like I said, I want to get the word out more. This is certainly one forum, but there are certainly other forums. If you guys have thoughts as to how we can reach families who have small ones that might be interested, we certainly want to take that into account and try to reach those folks. But even if we had one person today, we would start with one person, right? So the idea of this is, I personally think this has tremendous value just because it has the element of being proactive, as well as empowering our kids who want that ability to do something, but so far there's no particular program that allows that to happen today. So I echo Chief Corpus's idea that our kids today, they want to feel safe, and if they feel like they're empowered to help with that, I think there will be a lot of support to make that happen.
And I think for anyone who couldn't come tonight, anyone you might know, just tell them to check out the website, and if they like what they see, get in touch with a teacher, get in touch with the principal. You're dropping your kids off at school every day, and you probably see a teacher just, as you're driving through the carpool lane, say, hey, I heard about this great program, you should look it up.
Right.
That's how a lot of schools find me, is just a parent tells them.
So the other thing about tonight is I actually have a partner in crime here, so to speak. The Milpitas Beat is actually recording this as well, and we will find a way to get it online so that they can see and hear what we discussed today. Yes, sir.
The 2 things that you haven't mentioned that I'd like to suggest,
Absolutely.
and if you don't have time, I'll do it for you, is at the city council meeting and at the school board meeting, you're talking about the administrators. I'd go to public forum in both of those venues and announce what this is to the community and publicize it that way.
Good idea. We'd be happy to do that. Other thoughts?
Can we send through the parents' way? So
What we will do is, as I said, I will talk to our PTA council, which represents every school, with maybe the exception of Cal Hills, has a PTA representation. It's my hope that if the council feels strongly, which as I suspect that they will, strongly about this, we will try to set up additional forums through the PTA, which actually does take advantage of our Parent Square communication tool within the school district, and that'll be another forum that we can utilize. So certainly within Parent Square. But thank you, that's a good idea. Other thoughts? All right, so I'm gonna start wrapping up. Did you have other stuff that you want to talk about?
Just, if anyone wants to grab flyers at the back, those are actually a good talk through of all 4 of our programs. So if you want to take one, and then again, everything on the website, and actually our resources that are the self-implemented curriculum are free on the website as well. So if anyone you're talking to kind of wants to look through that, they just need to look up our website, it's all on there. And I have cards as well if anyone wants my email address
Right.
at the end. Otherwise, all good. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
So what I'm
Thank
doing
you.
here is, for folks who might be interested in participating, if I could get your name and email and contact information, forget the question part. And I've got pens up here for those who need it. We can start a, did I get you one? I'm sorry. We can sort of start a run-in list of interested folks and, oh, sorry. We can start a list of interested folks and I will commit to letting you guys know of, our next steps and opportunities for you to help if, if you so choose. Let's see, let me see if we can get that. So I want to thank Jillian
you guys.
for
Thank you for
coming
having
out.
me.
Thank you for showing up. I do have to ask you for a couple of seconds here if I can get this going here. There it is. Okay. I just want to, first of all, thank my sponsors. So thank you, Julian. That's her contact information, so if you want to take a quick picture of that, and we will also have this on our website. I want to thank my sponsors, the Milpitas Beat, for helping me record this, and certainly our San Jose City College Milpitas Extension for allowing us to host it here. And we are the Milpitas Community Educational Endowment. That's who we are and what we're doing. We have a few things coming up on March 9th. We have a STEAM showcase that's here. Actually, most of our activities are here, so we have a STEAM showcase on March 9th. We have our community conversations, our March conversations. Hopefully we'll have Chief Corpus up here. And then on April 13th, we'll have our Summer Opportunities Fair. So just a few things that we have planned. And again, thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll hang around. I'm sure Julian will hang around as well. But thank you for coming out, and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell whoever you want to tell about
Everyone you
this
see
particular
today,
program. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone.